Hey everyone, I'm Kevin. In today's video, we're going to be installing our universal rock light wiring harness here on this 2024 Toyota Tacoma. So here I have the main wire harness. Now this is a product we're really excited about. I went ahead and laid it out in a way that we can kind of walk through each extension of the harness and kind of show you what goes where before getting it installed on the truck. So starting off over here on this side, we'll grab our battery connection side of things. So you've got a fused power circuit here with a fuse already installed, as well as a ground side. Those already have eyelets crimped on to make that nice and easy. Then continuing down the harness, you come to the relay here. We went with a really nice watertight relay setup here. If you look at a lot of aftermarket wire harnesses, they don't always have a full watertight relay here. So those of you that are going off-road, doing some overlanding, you might see some water crossings, or hey, maybe you just want to do a nice detail under the hood and you don't want to have to worry about getting this wet. We took care of that for you right here. Now moving down to the next leg of the harness, we give you plenty of slack here. This is the leg you're going to need to feed into the cab of the vehicle, which we'll walk you through on this Tacoma at least as we get this installed. So here we give you female spade connectors that are going to tie into your switch, either through a harness style plug or right to the back of a Carlink style switch, depending on which one you select. So pay attention to that in the drop down menu on the page where you purchase this harness. Continuing down the line, this is gonna give you some extra slack in between there, and then it does Y off into two separate sections where it goes out to your individual sliders. So these are the ends you're gonna need to kind of feed down along each side of the frame and out to the sliders themselves. So with just one side in hand here, you'll kind of see if I pull this up, one leg is much longer than the other. The shorter leg is just going to be for the front light closest to the front of the vehicle, leaving the longer leg to feed out toward the rear of your slider. And then as you come to the end, you have some nice waterproof, weather-tight connectors out here that will need to be crimped into your light. So as you come in close on these weather-tight connectors, you can see that they just have a nice little thumb press tab to be able to release and remove those. If you pay close attention to the wire colors, you'll have power coming in on the red side over here, along with ground, of course, on your black side, and that does switch going out to our light. So you have now a white ground and a black power on this end of the connector. That's just because it matches the power and ground on the light side, so long as you're using our provided rock lights. And the only reason this is really separated at this connection, and we leave you to butt connect and heat shrink these here, is because you're going to receive your rock lights when you get your rock sliders and the connections that you see here when you purchase this wiring harness. So that part should be pretty simple and straightforward, and whether you choose to do that right now and then simply unplug these and install it along with your light, or do this right at the end, is entirely up to you. You should have plenty of length in this harness that you could do that and achieve that just as well once everything's installed on the vehicle. So with that little overview out of the way, let's get this thing installed up here on the truck, starting by locating the battery under the hood, which on this 2024 Tacoma is over on the passenger side. So we'll grab primarily the relay as well as power and ground side of our harness and get started finding a location for it up here. Now again, we're installing this here on our 2024 Tacoma, so those of you that have a 24 and up Tacoma are in luck. You can kind of follow right along and copy what we're doing. This is, however, a universal rock light harness, so anybody who's buying our sliders can get it installed on their vehicle. You're just going to have to figure out just a little bit of this on your own and get yours installed properly. So to start things off here under the hood, first I want to give you a word of caution. You're going to have a lot of excess wire at this beginning point, and it's going to kind of be strewn about under here, as well as you're going to have to route it down next to, or at least close to, the exhaust and the engine and everything as you get down there toward your sliders. So keep in mind that some of this stuff may be hot. Ideally, you'll be doing this while your vehicle is cold so that you don't injure yourself or damage your harness. From there, you'll want to start out by grabbing your relay. Typically, we're going to locate this first because you want to get this somewhere close to where you're going to pass through the firewall and into the cab with that lead of your harness, and make sure that you have enough slack there. Now on this Tacoma, we found a pretty nice spot where we can use a factory hole right up in this corner. Obviously things get a little compact in here, so you may not be able to see all of it, at least while I get it installed, but we'll try and get a camera in here so that you can see where we've got it bolted in kind of after the fact at the very least, and show you this the best we can. Now again, keep in mind this is a universal harness and you're going to be installing it on a lot of different vehicles, so this only pertains to this 24 Tacoma. So again, this was a factory M6 threaded nutsert kind of out here just inside of the fender, so I pulled an M6 bolt out of our bolt bin here. This is not a supplied fastener, and we're going to route this down in here and get this started. Once you've found a good spot for the relay and you've got that secured in place, you'll want to grab your power and ground lead, the main power and ground for your harness, and route this over to your battery. So again, in this truck, that's over on the passenger side. So I've already kind of come through planning for this and pre-drilled some holes in the plastic cowl piece up here, so I have a nice place to zip tie to. That's kind of up and out of the way, away from any heat sources or any potential abrasion. From there, you also want to take a look at the lead that runs into the cab and make sure that you have enough length to get it both in there, not just through the firewall, but down and into your switch. Then you know your relay location is going to work well for you, and you can leave that in place and start moving forward. Now as I start to route this across the front of this engine bay, I will just point out real quick that this truck already has some existing wiring in here for some aftermarket lighting, so keep that in mind. The smoother loom that you might see here throughout the video is from the existing wiring, where the corrugated loom is what we are routing right now. So as we make our way across to the battery, a couple things here. I've left my zip ties just a little bit loose so that we can pull some extra slack, or even pull it back to kind of eliminate slack if need be. Then you want to kind of check that your lead lengths are going to work out for you here close to the battery. So I've got the power side routed in over here where I like it, and I know that I can get it tucked in here discreetly up behind this power cable and eventually bolted in there. That will kind of be the final thing we do, or close to the end of this install. So we're going to leave that off to the side for now and cover this back up. And then for this one, I've got a nice spot, again, kind of tucked down in here where you can't see, but there's a nice factory grounding point in here that I'm going to bolt this into and just kind of share that location. Back over on this side, we now need to grab our switch lead. This is again the one that we have to feed through the firewall somehow into the cab and wherever you're going to be mounting your switch, ideally in a factory mounting location inside of there. So a couple different ways you can do this. Every vehicle, again, is going to be just a little bit different. So a lot of times we've seen people, and we've done it here, there's a large factory grommet where your factory wire harness routes through. You can kind of make a slit into that and pass some extra wires through it. You can also disassemble the way they have it taped and sometimes get some wires fed through that way. We got really lucky on this one, it seems like, because there is a rubber plug in the firewall that's about the perfect size for us to get this wire loom through, as well as add just a nice little rubber grommet in there to protect it and pretty much seal it up from any water intrusion as well. So again, we'll try and get in here and show you both that and the relay in just a moment, but it does get pretty tight. If you don't have either of those things, or you don't want to try and go through that factory grommet, as long as you can get in here with your tools and also see the backside from inside of your cab, you may have to drill a hole to install a grommet into there and have a nice clean spot to get your wiring through. But again, you want to be really careful with that and make sure you know where you're drilling into on the cab side of things so that you don't damage any of your factory components there. If you are going to go that route, what we found works pretty well is a 5/8 diameter hole, again with the appropriate size grommet to make it fit nice and tight here, but you should have at least that 5/8 hole size if you're going to get these connectors through as well. So I had to get in here with my screwdriver so that I didn't cover up this grommet with my hand, but that works out pretty well because this allows me to kind of just press on it and pull out, which frees that up from the firewall. Hopefully inside of here you can also see that that now kind of has some fabric in behind it. So we will have to again make sure there's nothing in behind there and then find a way to cut through that fabric. We'll probably just use something like an X-Acto knife and then we'll be able to pass our wires right through there. From there I'll take the wire ends and push them one at a time through the grommet that I'm going to be using. And then what I'll do here is kind of feed or roll the grommet all the way back on this loom, basically taking up all of the slack harness here under the hood, and I'll tie this up inside under the dash, and then we can continue moving here. After that, I'll feed these wires through the firewall one at a time, just like that grommet. So here is just a brief look at it with the slack now fed into the cab and the grommet installed in the firewall. Now from here, the remaining wire is going to be all of this that needs to get routed down to each of your slider legs. A good rule of thumb here is to follow factory components. So on this side of things, we're going to basically follow the factory brake line routing path. That's going to keep us nice and far away from any heat source because they don't want those heating up. So again, it's tight quarters back in here. You're not really going to be able to see, but we're going to follow those right down through this path. We'll try and show you the best we can once we get this truck up in the air, kind of how we came down along there and alongside the frame. So first things first, I have to admit that I lied to you, and on this truck specifically, the brake lines run across and down the passenger side, so we're actually following the fuel line routing path that you can see here. We were able to pretty easily, through this nice big opening, one, get up in here and zip tie into the inner fender support in pretty close to this firewall, and then also kind of just nicely route that down and follow this line, which we'll just continue moving back. That keeps everything nice and far over to the side away from this rotating drive shaft as well. So as we make our way back down this driver's side frame rail, we're basically working until we get to the first Y in this leg of the harness. This, we want to now kind of find a good spot to jump across to the other side frame rail. So something such as this nice solid frame cross member that we have here is what you're looking for. This is going to give you something to get it safely up over top of things like the exhaust, the drive shaft, and even the fuel tank over on the passenger side, which is where we're trying to go. We want to get this Y about in the middle of the truck so that we have an even length of harness out on both sides to then get to each slider and in turn our rock lights. So with that T or Y, if you will, kind of roughed in over toward the center, you'll see that we do have on this truck a little bit of slack left over here, so we'll kind of double it over itself, and then we want to find a nice good spot to tie it up. Now the factory chose on this truck to route fuel lines through this cross member, so if they're going to put fuel there, we probably could tuck our wiring in there, but I'm going to take just an extra couple minutes and actually drill a couple holes in the heat shield here so that we can tie this up above the heat shield, just to kind of be extra cautious in this location and get it as far away from the exhaust as possible. From there, I may come back in here and add another zip tie or two along this side once we get things finished up out on the slider end, and then we'll want to follow this cross member all the way across, making sure that everything is tidied up there as we go across, again, the drive shaft and over top of that fuel tank. You'll then need to feed the remaining harness up over top of the frame so that you can get it out to your rock lights. Now when you get out to this end, you're going to notice that you have a shorter and a longer lead. On this truck, I'm going to be using the shorter lead to go toward the front rock light and the longer lead to go toward the rear. And again, how you tie this up is going to be up to you and your vehicle's configuration. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. You could continue to tie along the frame and then bring each of these out to the lights individually. You could also just follow your slider legs out to the slider and then tie it into the back of the slider, because our Blitz sliders usually have enough room in there that you can find a good place to tie this up nice and discreetly and in a safe place out of the way. Now, as you can tell, at this time, there's no sliders installed on this truck, so we'll take a moment to get those installed kind of off camera, because that one's going to be its own installation video entirely. So if you're installing Blitz sliders along with wiring up your rock lights, go ahead and check out that installation video on the product page for those Blitz sliders. With our slider at least partially installed, we've got a rock light installed out here. As you can see, the wires hanging there. Again, you could do this step out on a bench, but we're going to do it in here under the truck. This is where you'll come to your final wire ends, the ones we mentioned earlier on that you will have to crimp in place. For that, we provide you a heat shrink butt connector. So if you've never used these before, they crimp in just like any other butt connector. You can slip it on to one side wire here and just crimp that in place. And do the same thing at all remaining locations. Now again, when you're tying these in up there, just keep in mind using our rock lights, you're just matching wire colors. If you're using a different company's rock lights along with our harness, you will want to pay close attention here to which side is power and ground. Again, white out on this end turns into the ground on our harness. With both leads crimped in, you'll now want to heat these up to shrink them. You could use a heat gun just as well, but we've got a small butane torch here turned down low because we like fire and danger. Just be cautious of your surroundings when using fire to make sure you're not damaging anything in behind there. Now with both of these shrunk, they're now sealed up and weather tight, but we are going to come back in and just add a small piece of loom we have around the shop here so that we can kind of clean up the look of this and match the look of our existing harness before plugging these back in and moving on to the inside of the truck. So there's a quick look at it with the loom now installed, kind of matching the existing harness, and you'll want to, of course, repeat this process on the 3 remaining lights. So here in the cab of the truck, you've got your wires fed in here from your harness. Now you need to figure out what you're going to do about a switch. So let's talk about that for a second. We're going to give you a couple different options on the website, so pay attention when ordering your harness. You can order it with no switch at all if you want to provide your own essentially from somewhere else, so that you can get one with a very specific kind of light up logo on the front. We totally understand that. We know guys want to customize their rigs, so we give you that option. From there, we are going to offer essentially blank switches, so just kind of black plain switches to give you something to use there as well. One will for sure be the Carling style rocker switch that I have here, which allows you to use the spade terminals on our harness and plug them right into the back. A lot of you guys are probably familiar with those. From there, we know Toyota offers a lot of different factory accessory switch blanks inside of the cabs of their vehicles. We know those vary from vehicle to vehicle, so for sure we're going to offer the smaller rectangle style switch. Again, it will be blank, so not exactly like the one I have here, which shows a fog light indicator, so don't expect to see that. And again, check the website for the most up-to-date photos and info on those. So in the case of this truck, I have what seems to be the newer style square switch that we're going to be installing in one of the factory square blanks here. Now the switch we picked up for this does have a 4-wire setup, and you'll notice that our harness only has 3. That's because a lot of these switches, again, that have a more custom logo on the face here, typically have a spot for you to wire in a dash accessory light so that it fires up with the dash lights when you turn your headlights on at night, for example, and then oftentimes has a second indicator when the switch is actually turned on, or kind of a dual brightness feature to kind of do the same thing. So if you have something like that, you'll need to find that dash light power in the dash and run your own additional jumper over to that 4th lead to kind of finish up your install on that 4-wire style. So for the sake of this truck, I first had to pop out this lower trim panel, which does contain 1 switch on our trim package. It'll have 2 switches on some. That was pretty easy. Essentially, this just kind of slides in and has some pressure clips out on the side and the bottom and top. We just got a plastic pry tool in the top here, kind of pulled down and out on it, and we're able to remove this whole thing and disconnect 1 plug to get this out of the way. Then, kind of laying in here on my back, I was able to figure out how these switches come apart. So there's tabs out on either side of them. I was able to get a small pry tool in there and kind of press on those tabs while pushing out on the switch, all the while kind of laying on my back on the floorboard. That's what you have to do in this one if you don't want to remove any of these additional dash panels. If you can get in there and do that, that's going to be the easiest way to get it done for sure. So from there, we can take our switch, we'll feed the wires through the square cutout and down where we can access them. Make sure the switch is oriented properly, and then work on pressing that into that location until you get a nice click, making sure it kind of sits nice and flush with your remaining switches. And then we just need to feed our remaining wiring up through here, again in a safe location, making sure it's out of the way and kind of getting it tied up along the way. And then we'll just be connecting our spade terminals out here to finish things up here on the inside. So like I said, with it routed up into this opening, we'll just take these one at a time and basically just by color matching, get them plugged in here. Then with that wiring safely tucked out of the way, we can reconnect our switch in here and reinstall this switch panel. Now from here, we'll again be back out under the hood. This is where we're now connecting the power and ground leads. So on this truck, I was able to route right up to the top on the battery on the positive side of things and use this nice factory post. This should all then fit back in under the factory cover once installed. And then this one's again hard to see, but down here between the battery and this fuse and relay box, there is a nice ground over here on the side that we're gonna pull this ground lead over to and get it bolted in using the factory hardware. From here, we'll reconnect the battery and then we can go over in the cab and test out that switch. So as we come over here, you can see that these lights are now functional and everything is working properly. So this installation is pretty much complete. So from here, go ahead and tidy up any remaining wiring you may have and trim off any of your wire ties to round out your install. From here, we really hope this installation video helped you understand how easy this pre-assembled harness can make this entire process. And as always, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to us. You can always send us an email at info@victory4x4.com or give us a phone call at 269-459-8447.